In this example, I'm going to walk you through the steps of how to simplify a complex fraction. A complex fraction is a fraction where there is a fraction within the fraction. Here's one approach. Now, you should know before we start, there are actually two approaches that work really well. But to cut to the chase, I'm going to just show one of those two approaches. I'm going to use the approach that I feel is typically easier for most students, and that's to start with the least common denominator. So we see that there's two denominators, well, there's three denominators if we count the whole x plus 5 over the square root of, or 5 over the 8x. But when we look at the two individual fractions that are inside that make this complex, we have an x or an 8x. So those are the two denominators. I'm gonna be concerned with the x and the 8x, and the least common denominator is going to be an 8x. So the common denominator that we're going to use is 8x, and what I'm going to do with that 8x is I'm going to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by 8x. Now that means multiplying the 4, the negative 9 over x, the x, and the 5 over 8x. Now, why can I do that? Because really, all I'm multiplying by is a 1, the multiplicative identity. By multiplying by 1, I don't change the value of the expression, but I can manipulate it to look differently. When I multiply by 8x, I've got to be mindful of multiplying everything by 8x. So it's going to look like this. 8x times 4, 8x times 9 over x, 8x times x, 8x times 5 over 8x. When I simplify this, if I've done it correctly, then notice that the denominators both go away. The x's and the 8x go away. So what am I left with once I've done that, simplifying? What I would be left with is 8x times 4, or 32x, minus 9 times 8, which is 72, over 8x times x, so that's 8x squared, plus 5. And now I could simplify from here by simply factoring the numerator. The reason I'm going to factor is to see if there's anything that reduces. And this 32 and 72 can both be divided by 8. So I could factor out that GCF, greatest common factor of 8. 32x divided by 8 is 4x. 72 divided by 8 is 9, so I have 8 times the quantity of 4x minus 9 over 8x squared plus 5. Don't make the mistake of being a home wrecker. You don't want to take this 8 and this 8 and divide those out or reduce. The reason why is there's an implied parenthesis here around that 8x squared minus 5. And we can't divide into this 8x squared plus 5 because the 8 isn't also a factor of 5. Now, if I factored an 8 out of the 5, I could do that. But we can't factor it out. We can't reduce that 8 over 8. That's one of the most common mistakes students make, is factoring this 8 with the 8. Do you see it now? That we can't factor the 8 out because the 8 isn't a factor of the whole denominator. So it's done as it is. Hope that example helps you with simplifying a complex fraction. Keep practicing. It's a complicated procedure until you've done it a number of times, and then it'll seem so easy. And what we've done again was we found the least common denominator for the 8x and the x was 8x. We multiplied the numerator and denominator both by 8x, and that cleared out the fraction and the 9x and the 5 over 8x. And then from there we factored to simplify.